Well, good morning. Welcome to Books at the Bottom of the Stairs. My name's Lorene. I'm filming to you from the backyard, and I feel a little bit self-conscious because speaking inside the house I can do any kind of crazy thing, but speaking out here I have no idea if anyone's listening. And there's a fountain going in the background, so I also don't know what the sound quality is going to be like, because every time I try to listen to it I can hear the fountain while I'm listening to the fountain, if you get what I mean. So hopefully this sounds okay. Or I'm talking to you today about my first books of Newbery Challenge. I've chosen to begin with 2002. 2002 has a fairly short list. Let's see, there were only 2 books awarded, which is kind of interesting because the following year I think there's 5 or 6. So the one that won was A Single Shard by Linda Sue Parks, which I have already read. And the one that I read for this year is Everything on a Waffle by Polly Hovarth. In the background you might be hearing a cardinal singing, so just in case. Okay, so A Single Shard, very interesting, just with respect to talking about it today, because in the Horn book, this is their Newbery Centennial issue, and they have got an interview with the author of the Shard, and I think that it's just kind of a single shard. It's very, very interesting that she gets to speak about it. She is an Asian author, and in the article she's talking about how over the last 20 years there has been quite a shift in what has been awarded. So she goes back to prior to 2001, and they have the statistics. It was 95% awarded to authors of white background and 1% to an author of a black background. And that went to Bud Not Buddy by Christopher Paul Curtis, not in the year 2003, but that was just 2001 or earlier. Then from 2002 to 2021, they have increased their spread so that 60% goes to white authors, 10% to black, 10% to Latina, and 20% to Asian. Now, I don't know whether this is a Canadian perspective or if it's just not on the radar because the statistics are basically zero. But in their stat analysis, there are no categories for Indigenous writers. And one of the other things that I don't know whether it's something that people are conscious of in the States, but we often acknowledge authors who are newcomers to Canada. So I don't know whether they get acknowledged once they've received their Canadian papers, or whether I think sometimes if we've got a particularly good person who just like steps on the base in a Canadian airport and then goes somewhere else, we claim them as Canadian. You know, we're kind of bad for claiming people who are no longer associated to Canada. Why is that significant? Well, Linda Sue Park has got a very good explanation, is that the Newbery Award, not only for the award itself, but in the type of books that it's recognizing, is becoming more and more inclusive, and not only for its authors, but it's expanding its readership. And she has an interesting sentence here. By scanning the list of winners and honor titles, we can trace the evolution from model minority stories and historicals that were comfortable for white audience, and she includes her own The Single Shard in this group, to contemporary settings and characters for whom ethnicity is identity but not entirety. And so then she kind of goes over the books that have been included in that expansion. And I think one of the things that we are coming to realize as to why we need more diverse books, and this has definitely been an awareness that has come out of Black Lives Matter back in 2013 and so on, is that it's not just about making readers comfortable by having, like seeing themselves in a book, but it's also for those of us who don't have those backgrounds. If I pretend I was a black author and I'd never paid any attention to an Asian author, or, everybody seems to pay attention to, whiteness, because that's just the way things are currently, and we're hoping for change in that regard. So it's interesting to be able to take on authors from different backgrounds, and that's why I like that there are also authors who have got diverse countries. Maybe they come from Haiti or Cuba or Russia or what have you, and perhaps they are American or Canadian citizens and have been for a couple of generations. I like it when authors are able to go into their background and use that as a source of their story material. So that's why I really love the Newbery. And prior to, I guess, what is she saying, 2021, I don't think that I was alert at all to diversity in my authors. I just accepted if a child was Asian or a child was disabled or something. I didn't think of it as a necessary conversation. I just took it on face value that, oh, here's an interesting character, and then just read about their point of view and moved on to the next book. And my reasoning for reading the Newbery at that time was they're just always solid books. Every once in a while there's a book that's included that I think is perhaps a little bit politically motivated in order to gate crash. Let's just pretend it's a Latino author who maybe doesn't have the most solid book, but it's solid enough that it can break barriers. And so I think the Newbery pays attention to that in the last decade. And so regardless as to whether you like the idea behind that or not, these books are just always rock solid. And I can't think that in all the years I've been reading it, I think there's really only been one book, and I can't even remember which one, that I thought, I don't get that one. Anyhow, the book that I read for 2003 is Everything on a Waffle by Polly Horvath. She is a Canadian author, although somehow she managed to crack into the American market. She also wrote The Trolls. She's got a really big backlist. I just every so often pick up a Polly Horvath because I just know I'm going to be happy. Again, she's another author where I have never been disappointed. There might be one group. What is it? Is it the Trout family? It might be the Trout family. I don't love as much, but still, I really, really enjoy it. She currently is living in British Columbia. Now, this book is kind of fun and sad at the same time. It was written in 2002. Got a little girl who is Primrose. Her last name is Scorp. I don't know where she gets her names from. Maybe she just throws a bunch of letters in a scramble box and out comes the last name, because some of these people's last names is really funny. And her sort of closest advocate for a little while is someone called Miss Perfidy, which is, maybe I'm saying it wrong, but perfidy, I think that's kind of a negative. Anyways, Miss Perfidy is her babysitter, and her parents had used this babysitter in the past, and a big storm comes along, so Dad is out. He's a fisherman. He's out, and the storm is just like one of those catastrophic storms, and Mom decides to go out in the sailing skiff and see if she can find him. Now, I don't entirely understand the logic behind that. However, love does what love does, and so off goes Mom, leaving Primrose behind in the babysitting hands of Miss Perfidy, who is slowly descending into final stages of Alzheimer's, dementia, something along those lines. Mom and Dad don't come back, and that is, we know about that. It's not a spoiler. It's right there at the beginning of the story. However, Primrose just doesn't believe it. She has complete faith in her parents' ability to weather the storm and to be discovered on an island somewhere, and so she goes down pretty much every day to the wharf to wait for them to come in. And her story is about being in a small community and not coming to grips with what everybody else thinks is completely obvious. She has 100% faith in her parents, and she's not going to let anybody talk her out of it. So along comes Uncle Jack, who is in the military. I think he was in the Navy, and so he gets transferred from the East Coast to the West Coast, and he becomes her guardian. And he's got her back. He decides to quit the military, the Navy, and become a real estate agent. And he's one of these guys who he's a risk taker. So he decides to get into property management development. And the two of them are encountering different people in the community who are well-meaning. Some of them have ulterior motives. One of them wants to get Primrose into children's custody, children's social work. Anyhow, you know, foster care. What's wrong with Uncle Jack? Nothing's wrong with Uncle Jack, but this lady has decided he'd make a good husband, and she doesn't want Primrose along for the ride. So she's trying to get Primrose sent off in a different direction. Miss Perfidy is getting less and less able. There's a few other people who are characters, but the main one is Miss Bertsy, who owns the waffle restaurant, and she serves everything on a waffle: steak on a waffle, blueberries on a waffle, pancakes on a waffle. And Uncle Jack has decided this is just like nuts. There's no way tourists are going to come. And so the part of the story is about the parents coming and Primrose's relationship with grief and hope, and also Uncle Jack's relationship with boundless hope that things are always going to work out, and things would just go a lot better if this waffle restaurant would, you know, smarten up and do, I don't know, you know, Asian fusion or something like that, whatever the tourists want. He just doesn't get the waffle storyline of this restaurateur, and Miss Bertsy is not going to give it up. That's her passion. She really doesn't care about the other ingredients on the menu. She's into her waffles. And as part of the storyline, as a way of meshing everything together, Primrose asks Miss Bertsy if she will teach her some cooking skills. So there's some lovely little recipes in here that are quite sweet. How to boil potatoes, and actually they boil potatoes differently than I do. I suppose one day I'll have to like follow her recipe. I think it's so funny. There's a recipe to boil potatoes. So I guess I'll find out whether I've been doing it wrong. So yes, I think as usual, this book, the Newbery books, always get a high ranking from me. 4.5 out of 5, 5 out of 5 as a rule. Thinking about my ranking system, I don't rank it the way a lot of other people do it. They're ranking it on strength of character or literary tour de forces and so on. My 5 has all to do entirely with sort of the happiness scale. The whether I enjoyed it, whether I escaped into it, whether it took me out of myself and maybe wanted to keep coming back to it. You know, there's plenty of books I'm reading where oh, I gotta finish that, or yeah, okay, I'll just read it while I'm having breakfast. And then there's other ones where, like, is it lunchtime yet? I want to read my book. So that's how I come to a 5. A 4 for me is pretty much the same, except that I think I'm starting to see plot gaps or a character gap that is starting to annoy me. And a 3, there's definitely one of those things happening, but I've still managed to enjoy myself along the way. Anything less than that means I probably don't even talk about 1s and 2s very much, unless it's a book club book or a book that, you know, is really currently on everybody's radar, and I just think, oh no, I think that's icky. So no, you're not really going to get a literary analysis from me very often. You're going to get a happiness evaluation from me, and this book made me happy. So as you know, the Newberries is for middle readers, and this author has got a solid backlist of good middle reader books, and I completely recommend it. Now, the question that I was asking everybody to consider when they read the books was, what was surprising for you? What was unexpected in this book, or the book that you're reading? For me, I think that although this was written in 2003, and we've had sort of an increase in technology and safety regulations and the ability to find people in the oceans when they've gone lost and so forth. The the hope of Primrose rested on the skill set of her parents. She did not rely on a rescuing exercise. Like, she was entirely committed to her belief in her parents. She didn't look to any outsiders to rescue her, to rescue her parents. I mean, that was happening, but her faith was entirely centered on her family dynamic, on the group dynamic, on their ability to support and trust and relate to each other, and just her, I guess, just not her, she wasn't like determined to not deal with grief. She was determined to believe in her trust and her faith in her parents. And I thought that was kind of nice, and was surprising, because quite often we will get books nowadays where the story line is that the character is supposed to come to terms with grief, and will one day eventually realize that the sister did die, or they were responsible for the parent's death, or something along those lines. So this was not like that, and I thought it was just so well handled. Suppose if you're someone who's coming at, oh, this is a book about grief, because you're trying to like open doors for a child to come to terms with that conversation, it might not be for that kind of a child. But if you're just looking at talking about grief and death and so on, this is a very positive approach to it. It does have a fairy tale ending. Oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Sorry. The ending's good and made me happy. So it's a little bit unrealistic. And I think that's okay. Does it always have to be realistic? Can we sometimes just have that, the joy of a solution gone right? Or the joy of someone's hopes and dreams being realized? I think that's okay. And I was really pleased to see that was still held very strong in this book. It hasn't aged at all. So that's it for me. I hope your reading dreams and adventures continue to come true, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.